Hello. Today it is October 23rd, 2021, at least where I am. And welcome. Thanks so much for coming to the Complexity Weekend 2021 October Heartbeat. We're going to start this live stream with a 25-minute tune by Michael Garfield, aka Future Fossils, one of our awesome facilitators. And in 25 minutes, we, the organizers, are going to meet you right back here for an organizer introduction and for some interactive Jamboard session. So enjoy the next 25 minutes of Michael's music, and we'll see you pretty soon. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the October 2021 Heartbeat. We're going to start this live stream off with some organizer slides. So let me actually just spotlight myself briefly. Hey, everyone who's still in Gather, please head over to the YouTube live stream and the organizers. We're down on the bottom right doing the live stream. Thanks. See you soon. Yes, we're doing it from Gather. And the organizers will join shortly. So we can just kick off with the slides. So whenever the organizers come in, that's when we'll start the conversation component. But until then, welcome to October 2021. Today in this live stream, hey Anna, we are going to first just give an intro to Complexity Weekend and talk a little bit about the registration information for the ongoing November 2021 cohort. Then we'll talk about this heartbeat specifically. And then finally, we will, about half an hour or 40 minutes, we'll do an interactive Jamboard. Okay, so first, our Complexity Weekend community of practice. Well, history and initial conditions are very important for complex systems, and also picking the right screen share. This image is from our first pre-Complexity Weekend in person in May 2019 in San Francisco. And since then, we've had 2 online weekends, cohort-based weekends per year. So May and October 2020, May, and then the upcoming November 21. And each of these weekends has been just a developmental experience. We've changed it and incorporated feedback. And this is kind of the namesake of Complexity Weekend are these cohort-based weekend experiences. And since 2020, as with other things, they've been all online. So Yana or Alexandra, want to add any comments? Cool.
Maybe later, Dave.
So another representation of that sort of temporal aspect of Complexity Weekend is in terms of the community's growth and renewal and your underlying progression on your complexity journey. So here on the y-axis is kind of like the energy or activity of the community, or how much time you're allocating, whether that's 1 to 50 hours or 10 minutes to 1 hour. And the little bumps at every month are our monthly heartbeat events. So these are shorter, informal events that are all synchronous. There's no asynchronous component. And then, again, twice per year are these more involved cohort-based experiences. And here we are in October 2021, preparing for this November 2021 weekend, which is only a few weeks away. And that's the green line. That's the 10 heartbeats and 2 weekends per year that Complexity Weekend puts on and organizes in a participatory fashion, which we'll talk more about soon. And then in the backdrop is you and your relationships and your teams, because 12 meetings a year is awesome. However, it's really just the sort of tip of the iceberg for those who are collaborating or working using complexity in their day-to-day life, whether before encountering Complexity Weekend, they would have said that about their work or not, because it's something we all kind of see in our own work if we look for it. And of course, these heartbeat events, as with all events, are organized in a participatory fashion. So the best way to get involved is just come to the events, connect on the edges, and then if you're interested in co-organizing as a totally equal co-organizer, then just get in contact with us. And we're going off into deep time, but registration is open for the November weekend. So that's sort of a nice spaceship taking off, I guess.
Yes, it is. Daniel. I think I added it last heartbeat in September.
Yeah, good angle. Not too high, not too low. Another view that kind of complements the dynamic perspective is a role-based perspective on our community. So the Complexity Weekend community of practice is global, and it's based upon active participation and event-specific roles. The ways that people onboard or get involved with Complexity Weekend, there's kind of 2 main entry points. The first is the monthly heartbeat events, like the one that you're participating now, if you're listening and paying attention to this. There's also the sort of public asynchronous element, which is currently our Keybase team, complexweekend.public. And then there's registration for the twice per year weekend cohorts. So those are some of the main inroads. inside of our community, the biggest circle is participants because everyone is a participant. Event-specific facilitation and organization are subsets of participants. And so we all have multiple hats. And then there's the relationships in the teams that form entirely within Complexity Weekend, like the committees that we increasingly rely on, like our Gather Committee, finances, legal, outreach, onboarding, etc. And then teams on the interface and outside of Complexity Weekend, giving a nod to that sort of ecosystem perspective on complex systems of systems, and associates and supporters who help scaffold our event through financial and non-financial contributions. Any thoughts or additions?
I really like this image of how we gather together and arrange ourselves in community, and that we have events that are directly within the scope of what the participants are doing, and then we have these associates and supporters who are sort of on the edge of the work that we do here. And the monthly heartbeats is what kind of keeps us together, and that we know that there's always something coming up every month. It gives a sense of consistency to what we're doing here. And then we have these bigger events, which is there's a lot more excitement going on. There's a lot more activity and discussion and opportunities to meet people. But then we can always say, oh, okay, so let's catch up again in the next heartbeat. And it's not 6 months away, it's just in the next month.
Thanks, Yana. Sasha?
Yeah, I'd also like to add that just participants make up the biggest portion of it all. And while we can have different roles at different times, once you join the community, you're a participant just like everyone else, and you're on equal footing and participation. And so that's really awesome. So you might not know when other people join the party, but once we're all here and talking in the Keybase, it almost doesn't matter because we're here when we can be.
Thanks. So we'll go into more of those themes soon. Here we took the RSVP question from everybody who RSVP'd, and the question for October 2021 read, pick 5 words in any language that express or describe complexity for you. And Yana composed them into a tent. So as we usually see, there's some bigger words. So that reflects like our shared truth, our shared understandings and terms like dynamic or emergence, beauty, chaos, unpredictable, connectedness, a lot of the key terms of complexity and complexity science. And then there's this long tail representing different languages, different skill sets, different interests. And that's like the special piece that we all bring to this community and to each gathering in the micro. So just always a cool way to look at, we can see the positives where we align and also where we bring our unique words to the mixing. Any thoughts on this?
I especially like that somebody raised interdependence, that we're always in relationship with each other through interaction, which was also, I think, was in the word cloud or tent cloud, and unpredictable. I think that's going to be this heartbeat, actually, with some of the talks that we've got today. So unpredictable definitely describes this heartbeat very well. So we've got some fun talks coming up.
Yep. Yep. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up. Yana, why did you choose a tent as the shape of the words?
Because it's a place where we can have shelter, but be outside in the world at the same time. And there's less distance or material even between ourselves and like within our shelter and the world outside. So we kind of get a stronger sense of being in the world, as opposed to, you know, closing our door and retreating from it in a house with thick walls and maybe very different climate from what's going on outside.
Yes, thin little blanket around community. So let's talk a little bit about just the registration for the ongoing November 2021 cohort. So first off, it's not too late. It's never too late. Even if it's not 21 anymore, we're still going to be having weekends. But if it is 21 still, it's not too late to join this cohort. So please join if you're considering it. So far, we have about 120 participants and 30 facilitators from 53 countries. So just at the total first pass pie chart of country, one of the important dimensions of variation in the cohort and community, there's over 50 countries, and around a quarter are from the US, as well as from many other places. So that's one axis of important variation in our community. And a few other axes drawn also from the registration data for this, not this heartbeat actually, but the November 21 weekend. So first we asked everyone, what is your familiarity with learning complexity on the x-axis and applying complexity on the y-axis? So there's no test, there's no requirement degree. So these are just somebody giving a number 1 to 10, but hopefully we see that there's a total scatter, people who have learnt some, but not applied. Applied, maybe been involved in the healthcare system or social work or logistics, but maybe not learned as much about some of the terminology or models. And then there's those who are familiar with both. And very importantly, many of us are in the very beginner on both. So especially to these individuals who self-evaluate as just beginning their complexity journey for learning and applying and still show up and be brave. That's really awesome. Another piece that we'll highlight is we asked in the registration info, what modes of participation in Complexity Weekend are you most interested in? And we included being a team seed, joining a seed, connecting through conversation, connecting with facilitators, participating in live facilitated events, using Keybase and the wiki, and then contributing to the community through facilitating or co-organizing. And just, 30 to 85% of participants are in some of these categories. So that's kind of, we each see our own ways to contribute and get involved, our own availability. So just, it's awesome that there's so much variation in what people contribute to. Any comments, or we'll continue? Okay. Yep.
I just had a quick thought, if we can just quickly go back. So this visualization of familiarity with learning complexity and applying complexity. So we see that there is, maybe you mentioned this already, but we see a clear trend that most participants are somewhere on that line between learning and applying complexity. And so it seems like there's quite a nice balance, if you will, between the two.
Yeah.
So we're learning while we're applying as well.
It reminds me of the flow diagram, like kind of the zone of proximate development. And so maybe after learning a lot, it's time to bring it back to the line and start applying, or maybe applying a lot, bring it back to the trend line. So I'll read this out and then anyone can give a thought. So from all these different countries and backgrounds and familiarity, what brings us all together? We have a shared purpose and interest in complexity science. We have a desire to have impact on co-creative teams and to improve our community of practice through feedback, participation, and peer mentorship. And we share the core values and desire to develop a community. Our collective purpose, and then also just anyone can feel free to give a thought, is to learn complexity science by doing on teams, to serve through deep time, and to include to innovate. Diversity is key.
I think that sums it up quite well, that we might each have different ways of exploring complexity, and we can learn how to do it in different ways by interacting with other people. And that's why it's essential that we have a diverse and broad community so we can find out and learn from each other what complexity could be in ways that we may not have considered because of the limitations of our own experience.
Yes, we've each only experienced the tiniest amount, and even lifelong, we won't experience too much more than that. And the complexity game is not in its final state. There's no perfect niche that's just awaiting us. It's about what we construct.
That's just like our own evolution. We used to be creepy crawlies. Now we're what we are now. And who knows what we're going to be in a million years or so.
Yes. Values are one way that we align, because values are something we can all acknowledge and then implement in our own ways. So I'll read them out and then anyone can give a thought or not. Complexity Weekend is itself a complex system. Education is active. We learn complexity science by doing. Teamwork makes the dream work. Participation means accessibility and inclusion for all. Respect is key, and step up and be brave. The one note I'll just... go for it, Yana, first.
Maybe we could have more opportunities to be brave. Like, this is actually kind of challenging for me to be here on the live stream. It's not a space I'm really comfortable with, but I thought I'd take on the challenge. So maybe we could have some more challenges during our heartbeats and weekends, and maybe just more challenge each other. Like, what are we avoiding? What are we not doing? And how can we kind of reach out beyond that and go forward?
Well, thanks for that, Alexandra.
Yeah, and in that vein, Complexity Weekend is a complex system, and so the effects of our actions and our braveness is non-linear. And so by stepping up and being brave, we don't know how we're going to positively or maybe negatively affect our teammates and people in our community. So, we can't predict what it's going to look like in this sort of complex system. So that's why it's so great to have new and returning participants, because they're just kind of bouncing ideas off each other and having these complex interactions and teams.
And these values are also in feedback with the people who stick around and constitute Complexity Weekend. So there's a whole document with a lot more information and comments if you want to go deeper here. But the way that we apply our guidelines and values are through our participation. So we encourage, whatever that means for you, to adopt a complexity thinking mindset. Communication is key at the one-on-one relationship and at the team level, so kind of multiple people. Embrace technology, but know its limits, and use good audio and visual etiquette while you can, while also recognizing the different software and hardware and wetware that we all are using. Full participation while still appreciating diverse abilities, and reach out on/to the edges and stay involved. Any of these guidelines want to add a point?
I think reaching out to the edges, I think we need maybe more tools to do that, and to even consider like, oh, maybe I've got a friend who would be interested in joining us. Sometimes we don't really realize that maybe the people just in our circles our intimate circles might be interested in joining in on what we're doing, and also going out beyond that. So that comes back to being brave. So stepping out and saying, hey, I'm involved in Complexity Weekend. Would you like to come? Maybe have this buddy system and bring someone along.
Yes, to be brave and send a key-based message or ask for the contact information of somebody who you spoke with. If everyone after an event connected with one other person, it'd be like a web moving forward versus just some gas molecules that happen to be next to each other and then are not next to each other. So that's how we actually have a densely connected community. Let's talk about this monthly heartbeat specifically. It was co-organized by Complexity Team, a aggregate entity that this month consisted of myself, Kevin, Sasha, and Yana. So thanks to the co-organizers. We did it a little differently this month. Usually there's 4 regular 1-hour meetings and then a small amount of asynchronous work. And this time we basically did it all asynchronous and had a few kind of meetings on the edges and used our shared documentation and single source of truth as organizers to keep it mostly together. And we mostly did. So nice work, co-organizers.
I think we handled the uncertainty and unpredictability quite well. We all came together in the end, so that was great.
Yeah, it was like, what day, what time is it going to be for our meeting? Okay, different time zones. How's it going to work? And then we just sort of like plowed through the barrier and just said, okay, let's just keep working, ignore that meeting, and we'll all find times to speak and to contribute when we can. So co-organizing is really fun because we all bring our own perspective on how to organize. And if you're like, oh, I wish this was clearer, or, oh, here's a community that could have been included in this, just that's your inner organizer voice wanting a different experience, which is awesome because we hope to scaffold your contribution that way. So just let us know if you want to co-organize or be a facilitator in a future heartbeat. We have 2 dedicated facilitators for this heartbeat, Alex and Jason. And both are also facilitators for the November 21 weekend. So they're kind of practicing some of their moves and getting used to gather, getting used to facilitating and gather. So that's kind of A+ facilitator, but also just fun for us at the heartbeat to hear from these 2. And the facilitated sessions, they're not lectures, even though I'm sure both these facilitators and many of our other facilitators do and could give great lectures. The facilitated sessions are facilitating your participation. So they're interactive. And that's something that we really structure for the facilitators. And also, like Jason and Alex, they're both participants in many other events. So that just kind of shows how you could be one role in one event and then a different event be another role. Okay. Do either of you want to just give an overview on Gather?
Yeah, I could do this one. I did it last time. So this is more or less what Gather Town looks like, minus the little text notes. And when you get in, you might be a little confused and not sure where to go. And what I usually do is I go to the people, where the people are, and then you can kind of see if there's someone that you know, someone that's familiar, and you can search for them. I think it's like right click, and then it will give you some options, and one of them is to help locate where they are, and then it will provide a line, and you can follow that line and you can find them. So that's usually what I do. I'm usually looking for someone to connect with. And there's the chat, and then usually we're posting links there to documents or Jamboards when there's a session. And then there's settings. So click on that if you need to change your audio settings or your video is not working. That's usually where to go. Also, if you want to play around with your avatar and change your look, then there's in the bottom in that middle section, that middle menu bar, next to your handle and your name, you can click on that and change your clothes and how you look and so forth. So, and also if for some reason something's not working and you need to respawn, was that right, Daniel or
Yep.
Sasha? That's in your name. So you go in there and you can respawn, or you can just refresh the screen. That's usually what I do. What am I missing? Map and screen share. Okay, so if you want to share your screen and you're in a session or you're hanging out with someone and you want to share a document or work on something together, then there's that little screen in that bottom menu bar between the map and the little smiley face there where all the emojis are. And you can go in there and do that. And what's also important, so if you look at the bottom right corner, there's that square with mute and video on and off. So that's really important when you're in a session and someone's talking. You might have, especially if you have some background noise going on, then just you can mute your microphone there, if you don't want to be like in a screenshot, or you just want to be, you don't want to have your video on, so you can turn that on and off there too. So that's quite important for privacy, and also making sure that the sounds are not kind of being taken over when someone's talking. So actually that's what Alexandra is doing now. So
Yes.
just to give an example. So that's kind of a gather. And of course, you can reach out to the team if you're stuck. There's our email address there, or reach us in Keybase. There's the help desk chat as well. So, yeah.
I'd like to add a few other things for user friendliness. If you do share your screen, the way to stop sharing is to click on the little computer icon again. Sometimes people don't know how to stop sharing and they're just in this, they're stuck. The other thing you can always do is, if there's since this is a online platform, if something goes wonky, you can't hear other people, they can't hear you, just go ahead and refresh the page, and that tends to help with any of the wonkiness of Gather before fixing anything possibly on your end.
Thanks. And it's just really important that we kind of get over the tech frictions as they do arise and will arise, because that's what it's about, is to connect and actually have a community experience. So the other tool that's important for the heartbeat today, there's Gather. That's where most of our interactions are going to be. And then there's the program. So the program's link, it's in the YouTube live chat. It's also in the email and in the calendar event that have been sent to you. We're here having a live stream. We're about to go over to the Jamboard, which I posted in the YouTube chat, or you can click on it from the program. We'll then have a short break after the live stream and meet up in the Gather for all events. We're going to start with a one-on-one session, which is just going to be unstructured time to connect with another participant and have a conversation. We'll have Jason's facilitated session. And then at 22 UTC, we'll give a overview of the weekend experience and kind of updates on the cohort for people who are in the cohort and just want a summary, and for people who are thinking about joining. And then at 3:30, we'll reconvene for, 22:30 UTC, we'll reconvene for some spotlight talks, which are under 5-minute talks by participants. So you want to talk about a project you're excited about, or looking for a team, or just want to share some research or some application that you're working on, or just a thought, cool book you read. That's a good opportunity in Gather. Then tomorrow, on Sunday, October 24th, we'll start at 1500 UTC with a welcome and another one-on-one session. At 16 UTC, we'll have Alex's facilitated session. 17 UTC will be a collaborative writing experience, which was really awesome last month. So it's a nice kind of bottom-up event. There's not facilitation in the way that these other sessions are. And then we'll have another interval for spotlight talks and seeding teams and just anything else that people want to talk about. So this is sort of our overview program. And of course, just go walk off, find a private space, because it's just about what you want to do during these intervals. Before we head over to the Jamboard, the ways that you can support Complexity Weekend. The first is really just to be here and participate. The next would be providing feedback, like filling out the feedback form at the bottom of the program. and also providing word of mouth recommendations. For example, for yourself or others to join the November cohort. That's the event after this one. There's also a PayPal address if you want to provide us some financial support, or we can talk more if you want to provide a crypto asset. And the contributions go towards funding events. All events are volunteer organized. Our main costs are the gather bandwidth and the honorariums for facilitators for the weekend, but not the heartbeat. And with enough support, we also want to be providing things like scholarships and microgrants and improving our Complexity Weekend infrastructure, like our website and our backend. So, any last comments on the slides, Yana or Alexandra? Otherwise, let's head over to the Jamboard.
I think that basically sums it up. So yeah,
Good.
let's head over to the Jamboard.
All right. So, Jamboard looks like this, and I'll just kind of recrop it a little bit. So in Jamboard, on the left side of the Jamboard, you can add a post-it note, or you can add plain text, or you can add shapes. So you can paste in images, so don't feel constrained to one language or format. We're just going to kind of walk through this Jamboard, and it's also a great way that people who are in the YouTube live chat, who are watching it live, can start to put some ideas down, and just we'll have a conversation together. So we can start with the second slide. And the way that you switch slides is on the top bar, just the back and forth, or you can click on the two and see what the slides are. So we'll head over to the second slide. What is your intention today? I'll start. I want to learn what happened in 1971, because that's going to be Jason's session. And I know he has interesting takes. And just to, how do we learn about specifics, like what happened in one year or a different year, while recognizing multiple perspectives and being okay with not knowing, and approaching all of that from a complexity perspective. Okay, attend Alex and Jason's talks. Yeah, they're facilitated sessions, and learn about live sessions. Cool. Going with the flow. Yep, sometimes it feels like we're getting flown, but hopefully we can make it work together. This is a great question. How does a live facilitated session work in the scope of complexity? So maybe, do either of you want to give a thought on that? There's probably a lot of ways to talk about it.
Yeah, so I added that post-it note just because I'm always curious and open to being surprised of how to include complexity in the sessions, our interactions and conversations, because it shouldn't or doesn't have to be like the sessions that we give for other kinds of events. And so I'm always curious about how to infuse more complexity and those ideas into these sessions.
Yes, there's the first level, like sessions about complexity, and ones where we share our different views on it or get some new information. And then there's treating a live facilitated session as a complex system, thinking about the edges and thinking about the sensitivity to initial conditions. What do people say early in the session, and how does that influence the way things develop? So, figuring out all of complexity. Okay, good luck, but I hope you're in the right spot. Start thinking of ideas on doing complexity. So this is kind of cool. It's like there's the learning and there's the applying. get a general idea on the actions for the weekend, yes, and the pre-weekend, which we're in right now. This is always helpful. Like, we have the pre-weekend playlist with all these videos, but sometimes just having a 20-minute or a 10-minute conversation reduces your uncertainty more than a wiki or a spreadsheet or a playlist. Reconnecting after a couple of months with conflicts. Great. That's why we host regular events, because we know that not every time is going to work for every person. Not every weekend, not every month, not even every year, but not every time zone for sure. So we want to design so that people who need to put it on the calendar a year in advance or only one day in advance, all are welcome. Get to know how I could help as facilitator or any future role for future weekends. Great. Perhaps spoken from a participant's point of view, so they're definitely in the right spot by starting as a participant. And getting the simplicity beyond complexity. So let's switch to the next slide, but maybe continue on that note of simplicity and complexity. So slide 3, who are you and how did you discover complexity? Maybe since all of us probably have given an answer to this question before, does anyone want to give a thought or relate it to that nice post-it about simplicity and complexity?
I don't know if this is entirely relevant. A local esports bar and cafe makes these wonderful cappuccinos at the moment with spiced pumpkin. Who would have thought? Cappuccino and spiced pumpkin. And they make these cool swirly patterns on the top of the, with oat milk, with the cappuccino. And then I was taking a sip of it, and then I saw how the turbulent form changed as I was kind of taking in some cappuccino. And I was like, is that sort of like, what an inhale looks like? And for me, complexity is like turbulence, the kind of the swirling of ideas, or even just, and you mentioned, Daniel, earlier, gas particles in the air. So things are kind of swirling around, and then when you take a breath, an inhale, you kind of take some of that in, and then how do you process that? Yeah, exactly. But then what happens when you take some of the cappuccino in? How does the shape transform? How do you impact the turbulence just by being in the room and breathing? So that's awesome. That's the kind of things I think about when I'm having the cappuccino. But yeah, so that, yeah.
Alexandra?
Yeah, related to that, just thinking about the different materials and properties of the things around us. So like coffee or beer, that I remember that was one of the kind of things that stuck with me from taking physics in college is why is it easier to spill a cup of hot black coffee than a pint of beer with foam on the top? It's because of the different like viscosity and sort of interaction of the materials, because the coffee is very low viscosity and wants to like tip over the edge, whereas the beer is colder and then has the foam on top, so it's less likely to spill over the edge. And I think about that with the latte. The latte foam is like protective on top.
So one thought on the simple and the complex. These day-to-day items, are they simple or complex? And that really reveals that complexity is a frame or a perspective that we take on systems or in systems, because any object can be approached from this way. And then the other simple and complex was thinking about the difference between turbulent, so supercritical flow that have all these eddies and whirlpools and wild fractal dynamics and supercomputers doing the simulation, and then laminar flow, kind of what might be called simpler flow. And then how breathing, it's like it's from all the turbulence outside and then it comes linearly or it comes laminarly out like into your lungs or vice versa. So just about how even the laminar and the turbulent, as kind of like a little bit of a compass for simple and complex, they coexist in systems. And also just a lot of times complexity seems like it's going to be the end point. Like it's going to be, well, it's complex. If it were simple, we would have known what to do with it, but it's complex. So what do we do now? And that's where maybe having community around complexity helps, because it reminds us that complexity is a starting point, even if things are difficult to predict. And so that's kind of a few ways that simple and complex. And in the registration information, I mean, every single time people will say they almost treat simplicity like a synonym for complexity, because we're looking for the patterns across systems. So here's some of these cool. So Odin's answer. Origin of life brought me to a life. I think that's artificial life. And that to complex adaptive systems and loop back. Here's another person's. As a science student, I was taught everything had an answer. Then I discovered geology, biology, complex adaptive systems, and closed versus open systems. And nothing was ever just a simple answer again. Fun answer, and recalls probably the educational experiences of a lot of us. Any other thoughts on this one, or we can continue?
Just quickly go, when you mentioned laminar flow, it reminded me of a few YouTube videos. So I think I'll put some links. One was with Diana Cowan, also known as Physics Girl, and Grant Sanderson. They did this combined video together about turbulence. So it's kind of very nerdy and exciting. And then there was another one. I don't know how to say the name of the video series, but it was also kind of cool. So I'll put a few links here on this page when I dig them up. So
Awesome.
if someone is interested, you can come back to it.
Yep. And it's really the rewatchability of the live stream and the artifact of the Jamboard that helps us also communicate and include participants who are asleep. Eduardo, I found Fritjof Capra's The Web of Life on a hostel bookshelf in China. So sometimes you go looking for complexity, other times it finds you. So let's kind of keep on that theme, maybe different complexity journeys or systems that we are interested in. Here we have on slide 4, complexity, exploring, foraging, learning, applying. What is happening here?
So I think this is like the cappuccino I had. That's kind of what it looked like at the beginning. And then when I was done with it, the shape was done. Like, yeah, it was very different. But
the cappuccino and the unpredictability, it's sort of like, well, it's unpredictable. So is it a random number generator? Can we mine Bitcoin with it? Is it truly unpredictable and random? Or might there be some pattern? Okay, well, I guess there might be some pattern. I guess there's some structures in the turbulence that appear more often than others, or there's some, due to the way that the air flap is, it kind of goes that way 70% of the time, but not 50. So there's some signal. Well, great. How do we investigate and model and describe weak signals or important patterns in massively interacting systems? That's the descriptive part of complexity. How do we think about it and model it and go from just throwing our hands up and saying, well, it's unpredictable, to saying, I guess it's not purely unpredictable and there might be something we could predict, to there might be modalities of intervention, or there might be ways we could design subsystems that have some of the nice features we're looking for. So just like...
That's like the barista who's making pretty pictures in your cappuccino with the milk. And yeah. I don't know if anyone's had that, but yeah.
So someone wrote in the chat, great thing about the cafe. I don't think I understood that one. If they're talking about the cafe one, I I guess just using the complex properties of real materials, the kinds of things that slow down supercomputers for years, but get bubbled into a cup of milk. And then the way that that foam is both the complex structural emergence of the materials of the milk and the lipids and the proteins and all these things like happening. And then also there's this aesthetic and relational and symbolic component. It's not just foam, that's already a complex system, but now throw in, the person at the cafe in the cultural context and the experience of the art and, the too much euros that they paid for that latte, add in a lot of pieces, and then it becomes, and the supply chain, how did the beans get there? That's a bigger discussion than just how do bubbles enmesh each other, which is a really important technical conversation. But that's not the whole picture of complexity. So just that one kind of coffee shop vignette that Yana shared just shows like there, at least to me, that there's many inroads and disciplines that get invoked, but then also it's connected to our experiences that we're having every day. Oh, Odin says, no, I meant the slide. So, which slide? Maybe this one. What does this slide mean? Oh, and then Odin says, actually, this is a use for reservoir computing on a cup of coffee. So it's like, current advances in machine learning, there's going to be some colleagues and friends we meet here who will share, like, what is reservoir computing? We're not going to be able to give the lecture here, but somebody you're going to bump into might know a lot about that. And then that's a cool space to be in.
Related to exploring complexity and just complex systems, reading Anil Seth's book yesterday called Being You, an exploration of consciousness and related topics. One example that they bring up as to how to study brain patterns that give rise to consciousness when you don't understand how any of the system works. One experiment that a group of researchers came up with was recording EEG from the brain of a person while doing transcranial magnetic stimulation. So pinging a certain part of the network and seeing how the ripples propagate out. So even if we don't know anything about what's going on inside, we can observe that there are definitely different states. So a sleeping person versus an awake, alert person, their brain network will respond differently to the same kind of ping at a specific region of the brain. So perhaps we can apply that kind of experimental design or thinking to these bigger complex systems, beyond the brain, where we can disturb or ping the network in a specific way.
Nice. Also, and Odin was referring to this slide. So let's keep the complexity, exploring, and foraging theme, and maybe in the rear view mirror, talk about it while we go to number 5. What is something that you're curious or wondering about? So you can just pick up with that theme of wondering about what does exploring and foraging have to do with complexity. Yada, want to give a first thought? Or I get going?
Oh, wow. What is something I'm wondering about? I think I'm still wondering about this turbulence thing, but maybe we've kind of gone too far with that.
I'm wondering about when you said esport cafe. It's just like, wait, what?
Yeah, I can put the link if anyone's coming to Suomi, Finland, and you want to come check out the esports bar. It's called Late Game. It's a pretty cool place, and you can go and play computer games, and it's kind of like the upgrade of the old internet cafes. That's I guess that would be one way to describe it, but maybe the proprietor would kind of not be happy about that description. So, but no, they're doing great work, and the coffee is amazing. So, But yeah, so anyway, so what's something I'm wondering about. I like that someone mentioned this foraging, exploring and foraging, which came from the previous slide. I like the way you can forage by like through community, like getting to know people without being too invasive. It's not like farming where you go and you clear some land and you make some space for yourself and then you will plant plants that you want to eat. But foraging is more like accepting what is there and going through the space and looking around and getting a feel for where you're going. And you might have some intention in mind of what it is you're looking for, whether it's mushrooms or berries or leafy greens or root vegetables in your forest, for example. And you'll go and just kind of see what's there, and accepting what is available, instead of demanding more or clearing land. And so perhaps we can go with that kind of idea through this heartbeat of foraging with our intention in mind.
Thanks, Yana. Alexandra, want to describe this image you put?
Yeah, well, I heard foraging. I looked up ants and foraging to find a graphic, and I just came upon this paper, agent-based problem solving, the ant colonies metaphor. And yeah, I think it's just describing a few different ways that ants interact with an obstacle between their nest and food. And just like in part C, they can go all the way around it and explore, or in part D, they can just crawl over it, like a little rock or a wall. Or in B, they could just not interact with it at all. And so, yeah, like Yana was describing, foraging is just about dealing with what you have and choosing how you're going to interact with the obstacles or, interesting components of your landscape.
Cool. One other piece on exploring together, or exploring and foraging, is it's not like we're trying to reduce our inputs and get into, go into the meditation state and reduce our inputs, though there may be a time for that. That's an internal exploring or foraging. And then there's this external exploring or foraging. Like, we don't know where we're going. That's the difference between kind of exploring something versus going somewhere you know where you're going to go. And then ant foraging, of course, great model system. And just like, oh, there's a roadblock. Somebody can't hear somebody and gather. How are we going to just get around this? And so collective foraging and kind of working on problems together. I used to be obsessed with yellow post-it maintenance of cooperation against cheaters. We've seen many kinds of models, many systems where that same idea comes up, whether it's a business ecosystem or insurance or the ant colony or just sort of in the abstract mathematical space. That's what complexity is about, looking for patterns across systems. Because in the disciplinary context, you'd have one department studying that type of problem in one system and a different department using a different framework, different vocabulary, different interests in a different system. Well, surely these different perspectives are important, but also could we connect on the patterns across systems and maybe learn about how challenges like this are addressed in different systems, like biomimicry, looking at other areas? So, good questions. Okay.
I'd like to respond to that post-it about cheating. So I was thinking, like, in education, often there's like sort of a red flag when people are copying other people. But in art, for example, people will intentionally go and try, copy artworks. Okay, if you're declaring it as an original, well, that's another story. But if you're just there to learn a craft, the point is actually to copy. But somehow when we're learning to read or write or even code, there is kind of a red flag raised. Like you're not supposed to copy, and copying is not considered as learning. I'm someone who learns by copying, not to claim it as my own, but just to go through that experience, to know what it feels like to do something.
Great point. So I think we can just look at 6 and move on, but this is for us to enact. And you can put asynchronous feedback here. And on 7, also, we just, as time allows, we kind of add more slides in, so we never have time to get to every single one in each discussion. But I think it'll be cool for the last 2 that we look at, 8 and 9. So let's go on 8. We're going to talk about how and where complexity will have impact. And then we'll go from there into the forming teams. And that'll be our last interactive slide before we spend the rest of the heartbeat in gather. So slide number 8. How can complexity have impact in real world systems? How have you successfully applied complexity or not? And then how and where would you want to apply complexity? I can give a first thought, and that's actually a conversation I was having a few days ago at a pre-weekend event with Odin, where both of us work in bioinformatics, so computational biology. So it's kind of cool when we connect with people who have different backgrounds, and then it's also cool to connect with somebody who loves complexity and is in your area as well. And we were kind of both struck by this contrast between the cell and the genome and the niche and the species evolution. These are systems that people agree are complex systems, need to be addressed from a complexity perspective, yet the pipelines and the tools of the day-to-day of our work in bioinformatics, it feels not complex. And so it just, to me, spoke to how the fact that there's very few today who in their day job say, yes, I'm just learning and doing complexity all day, and so are all my colleagues. That's a cool, rare position. We would love to hear about it, if so. But then there's a more common position that many of us are in where we see that the system could be approached or interacted with in a way that respected its complexity a little differently. And that gap between knowing how the system is and could be, or just being curious about the system, and then the tools we have, that's the gap where we can apply complexity, not to just solve open-ended perennial problems, but rather to see a specific gap in application or communication, and then work with specific people on teams, maybe teams you form here, towards reducing that gap so that in 5 years, when somebody says, we're studying gene networks, maybe some of the network thinking from complexity has made it to the field, and they'll see a different contrast to build on. Yana or Alexandra, or we can just read some of these.
Yeah, let's go ahead and have a look.
Okay. So here, some nice on a food systems, restorative farming, and my first model was a network model of plant pollinator interactions and cheaters. Never published. It was too complex to me to analyze the rich results. That's what we have preprints for now. That kind of, maybe it's not finished, but maybe somebody would like to see it and cite it anyway. But that sounds like a really cool project. So there's sort of a food angle and a systems angle. Collaborative planning for events. Complexity weekend, complex system, organizers, emergent remote teams, working across our differences in availability and capacity, and how do we make sure that we're building on what we've done before, but also keeping it accessible for those who are joining for the first time. So that's definitely a complex system. What other areas?
Yeah, I'd just like to add that by kind of seeing how collaborative planning works within CW, it's really given me more hope or courage to try it out in other parts of my life where I'm doing collaborative planning with other people. And so, yeah, it really works inside out.
Socioeconomic systems, governance, and Web3. Very cool topics, things that a lot of people here are interested in, and just let's learn more. How do we make complexity science and the complexity perspective the norm, or something that's used in Web3? People say, wow, all of these cyber physical systems and the internet of complexity, or whoa, we're having this community connection. How do we move towards complexity rather than returning to some of the structures we know of in the past? Hoping to take a look at central bank inflation targeting from a complex systems perspective. Oh, I know. There's not enough money. We should just make more. Is that a complex systems approach, or is that leading to feedback loops that are destabilizing? Good questions. So I hope whether someone has been really familiar with learning and applying complexity, or they're just starting to ask questions, this is just a little tiny tip of the iceberg of the kinds of things that people bring to every complexity weekend event, from sort of the food and the systems that support us as physiological beings, to our social, economic, financial, our community level, the astrology. This is a cool image someone just added. Upstream conditions, how that moves through our environment towards the opportunities that we have. Direct action benefits of reducing critical mass of people. How does connection help to move a group towards common objectives? Great question. Let's go to slide 9. And we can this is going to be our last interactive slide. And then, the rest of the heartbeat will be in Gather. So this is sort of, people can do this anonymously and just add post-its, or they could add a name. If you wanted someone to contact, just remember that this is an asynchronous artifact and it's on a live stream, so no personal secrets needed. But it'd be really cool just to see what people on slide 9, what kind of opportunities they see, for example. So I'll just recap what these 4 boxes are, and then anyone can give a thought. So here are problems and or opportunities I see. So that's like the identification of those differentials that might be possible to have something happen in. Here are my interests and skills. So don't know what the delta is that needs to be fixed, but here's what I do, or what I like to do. Here are my attitude and values. And our team or work could benefit from these perspectives, skill sets, etc. So these are kind of different pieces of the puzzle. A team that's coming together at Complexity Weekend and sees their differences in perspective and skill and availability as kind of a yes and they align around a vision and a problem, and then they brainstorm and they think about what avenues of approach are going to be best, and they actually implement. That's a lot of pieces coming together. And so it does require the identification of a problem or an opportunity, maybe one that at first just one person sees, but then they share that opportunity with other people. It's going to require interests and skills and attitudes and values. Just imagine what would happen if there wasn't interest or the relevant skills or compatible attitudes and values. The project will not be completed, impact will not occur. And then maybe your team has all of the people it needs, or more likely, there are some resources or skills or views that your team will still need. Even though it might have a lot on board, there's still something that's needed from offboard. And so all these pieces coming together, and hopefully we can make that jigsaw puzzle arise. So cool stuff that people are writing. Anyone want to give a thought, or we can read some of these out?
Let's go ahead and read them out.
So, biology and sociology systems, Odin. Squasha wrote collaborative creation of drawings and diagrams, maybe like this one, Squasha. Interested in central bank and inflation, BJN Brown. And so you can see some of these people are putting their Keybase username. Stats and meta-analysis. Making a directory of active people with aim to solve specific problems. Yes, that's a really important project. Sometimes, it's good to have the list of 500 people who ever clicked a button once that said, yes, I'm interested in complexity. But it's also nice to have that smaller set of people who today are interested in building or doing something collaborative. And that's really one of the things that differentiates a community of practice and a project-based community of practice from, for example, people who like the same podcast, which is a community of shared interest, but it's often hard to activate or engage even vast communities of interest towards action. So you can look at how many views are on a YouTube video versus how many substantial comments there are. The ratio is not great. So a different strategy is needed to curate and understand, without just simple invasive data collection, of how do we actually connect the people who are active on the right problems with the right attitude and values, people, tools, ideas. And that's hopefully something that CW, either you see how we're doing it and you want to help contribute by participating or by organizing, or maybe you want to template it and go do your own thing. That's cool. Publication by...
I would like to add
Sorry,
to that,
go ahead, Yana.
Daniel. Yeah, no worries. So I would like to even take that a step further and perhaps even offer a challenge, so that the problems we want to solve lead to some material shift in our environment. So we're not just making more documents or more programs or more digital platforms. The outcome and the result is a shift in our living environment. And that's the change I would like to see, and that we would gather together in groups and really have that intention to work towards something that will transform the world that we're living in, but in a way that is responsive to the communities that we're living with and that would be impacted by these transformations.
Thank you. Very cool. And many of these, I'll just read this last one before we move on, like advance the academic and non-academic complexity workers, hint, that's you, to progress in their lives, including their careers. And then it's almost like, I want to just put that one in every box. It's a problem, it's an opportunity, it's an interest, it's a skill, it's an attitude. So it's something we need. It's something some of us can offer. Fun Jamboard. Thanks everyone. So it's we're going to just be bringing this stream to an end. We can just recall a few nice comments from facilitator Monica Kang about online collaboration, and just keep in mind, we'll just take a pause. There might be lag. Somebody might be in a different continent or just hearing a word. So we can all be at our best for community and just show up when it works and it's healthy for us, and we'll have fun. So with that being said, Yana, Alexandra, and Kevin, thanks so much for organizing this month, and to Yana and Alexandra for the live stream too. Really fun times.
And thank you, Daniel, for keeping the whole show running. This probably wouldn't be so consistent without your constant effort. So I just wanted to thank you also for that.
Thanks. It's fun, and have stable internet, we'll live stream. So anyways, we'll see everybody in Gather in just a few minutes. So 15 after the hour, 5 minutes from now. See you in Gather for one-on-one session. Bye.
Bye.
See you, everyone.